And welcome to this edition of Moving Well with Takia Geddes and Anthony Saul. We are excited to be here with you today to talk about a very poignant and expansive topic, and that is women and the D word. So just to give you a little background of who we are in case it's the first time meeting us. Again, my name is Takia Geddes, and I am the creator of the Kinetic Life Revolution, as well as a kinetic specialist and a life and lifestyle activation coach. And Anthony is a certified personal trainer and behavior specialist. And we're here today to really expand on the conversation and navigate, with this conversation, ways that we can begin to move toward a more peaceful relationship with our bodies, the conversation around dieting, and just for those who may be triggered by that type of conversation, I want to let you know that we will be exploring the diet culture. And if that is something that's triggering to you, then know that this is not the session for you to listen to. We will be talking about it from a perspective of a holistic and a holistic approach and exploring ways that we can really move into a more peaceful relationship, as I said. So, if you can bring yourself to be in this conversation and listen, it may even give you some tools for navigating for yourself. So let's dive in, Anthony. What are your thoughts? You actually brought this topic up to me, which lets me know that you probably have some thoughts that maybe even have been, dwelling in your mind for a while that you wanted to share. Is there a place that you wanted to kind of dive in from?
Yeah, so this has definitely been an important topic on my mind as a male trainer who works predominantly with women, and not many, but not all of my clients tend to have some kind of relationship with their weight that may not be positive. Whether they have weight loss goals, or they just tend to obsess over the scale too much, or there's just been a lot of variables and different ways that clients and just people in particular in our lives tend to struggle with nutrition and diet culture. And it's such a complicated and ever-changing way of life. So I think it's a very important conversation to get into and just kind of touch upon.
Yeah, I totally agree. So I think for me, the place I can start that would be most helpful is just to speak from personal experience. Growing up, being perceived as a female and receiving messages early on in my life, being conditioned in the kind of female format. I know that there was a lot of pressure on women to look a certain way, and there's certain ideals of beauty that were met, and specifically they were geared toward white women, who presented as feminine in the world, and tended to have their marketing being geared toward them, but everyone kind of felt the fallout. If you consider yourself a female. And so I think that there is generally a marketing agenda that tells women that if you live in a thinner body, then inherently you have more value. And if you have a larger body, then you have less value. And there's also one that says that you're not enough. There's a message that's constantly being put out that you need to change and do more to change in order to be accepted. And just being who you are isn't enough. And I think that even if you grow up in a household where you're supported and have healthy relationships, and you're told that that you're beautiful or all these other things, and you're cognitively fed ideas about beauty not having to do with those things, there's just so much of the other messaging coming from everywhere else that I think it's really an independent journey that every person needs to take to really step into who they are as a human being and develop some kind of an internal reference point for who they are in the world, so that they can have a right perspective about and also a right perspective about, dieting, eating, and develop a healthy relationship with food and their bodies. So that's my my take on kind of the larger picture. And I know that, I carried from my youth into adulthood an addiction to sugar that had to be revealed. Like I didn't realize until one day I looked over, and in my passenger seat, there were a zillion wrappers of what, the kind of untrained eye would call healthy bars. They were really like candy bars disguised as protein bars.
Yeah.
And I couldn't really buy just one and eat just one. I would buy several, and before I got home, several of them would be eaten.
Absolutely.
So, yes. So what I realized was, when I had this kind of epiphany of, this was several years ago, going on, many, many years now, but having had that epiphany where I looked over and I saw all those wrappers and knew that I was not in the little bears conversation. Like, I had eaten those things, and I was like, ooh, okay. So I made the connection to, the tendency to eat emotionally, to feel good, to kind of release those hormones that made you feel happy. And that's what I did as a kid. I grew up kind of a tumultuous household, and there was a lot of violence and anger and pain and sadness. And in order to feel good emotionally, I would eat and hoard sugar. I would eat, candy bars, Snickers bars. I would hoard like Hostesses and all the brands and the snacks. And, I loved, some Irish potatoes, which is basically coconut sugar and cinnamon. Like, I'm surprised I have my teeth at this point. Like, it's, so I realized that I carry, and even when I kind of moved into the field of wellness, I still trailing behind me was this craving that had become a physiological addiction to sugar, because sugar lands on the same receptors in the brain as heroin. So it's addiction is addiction, and I was definitely addicted to sugar. I would eat it, and then it would give me a little bit of a feel good, and then I would eat it again because it never lasts, though, and that's the problem. And so I went on my own kind of little journey with that and navigated that to get to a place where once I recognized the issue, the challenge that I was having, and recognized it as something that I wanted to change, right? I recognized that I wanted to empower myself to navigate my emotions in a more healthy way. And I think, honestly, that's what is really needed. It needs to be a kind of overhaul of our way of thinking about food and thinking about our bodies. I think as part of our human development, we tend to focus on our body as who we are. And so it's intimately connected to our identity. And therefore, what happens to our body happens to us. And that's just not true. Our bodies are not who we are. There are people with limitations, and challenges in their bodies as far as functionality of the general population of human being that live amazing lives because they live beyond their body. And they actually have developed a way to utilize the bodies that they have to functionally meet the intention that they've set for their lives, which I think is the larger goal, right? It's to, okay, so why are you here? And how does your body fit into that equation? How can your body serve you to actually help you move into fulfilling your purpose and doing the things that you enjoy and exploring the relationships with people that you want to have relationships with? Like, where does the body come in? And therefore allowing that intention that you create for your body and therefore your life also to be the guiding factor in how you approach food and how you approach your body. Like, at this point, I look at food and when I think about my next meal, I'm thinking about, what does my body need in order to function well? Like, that's what I'm thinking. And I know that my body responds best and I feel the best in my body and I'm best able to perform and do the things that I love to do when I'm not feeling bloated, when I'm not on some high, when I'm not feeling weighed down, when I feel good eating the meal and after the meal, I function way better in my life and I'm my best me. And
Yeah.
that, you know?
Yeah, so I think you did a very good job at touching on why the complexities of this whole conversation, this whole issue, and why getting past those challenges of whether your relationship with food or your relationship with your body can be so like difficult for people sometimes because of those honestly insidious social pressures, the media pressures, wherever they're coming from in your life that may affect you. And then the fact that our food and our bodies are two things we can't get away from because they are in every aspect of our life. Food is so, I think we've talked about this before, how food is so tied in to our identities, our culture, our trauma responses, our emotions, and then obviously our bodies are the vessels that carry us around. So breaking down those barriers and breaking down the why and how of why you may make the decisions that you do can be a long journey. And I'm sure that was like you experienced that when you were fighting your addiction to sugar, like doing all the mental gymnastics that you needed to do to kind of get to that end point of understanding how and why you were doing those things to yourself. So I want to talk to you about how you find a balance between and referencing with personal training clients or people in your lives in general, talking to people who do have weight issues and have excess body fat that they should be shedding and could be shedding, and balancing that conversation in a way that is not harmful, hopefully not harmful.
Yes. So I think that the ideal way that people approach the conversation is the way that they have that they can get into it. And so everyone's a little bit different. And so when someone comes to me and asks for my services, you know, the reason that they're coming is usually because they've experienced some kind of health issue as a result of carrying excess body fat or not having enough lean muscle. You know, they have health issues because they have osteoporosis or osteopenia, or they have cardiac issues, or they have inflammatory, you know, issues on the cellular or in the gut. They have, you know, GI issues. There are a plethora of things that happen as a result of being out of balance physically. So I speak to them in terms of what it is that they're coming to me for. So we'll take the example of someone who comes to me and says, you know, I want to lose 20 pounds, you know, and I'll ask questions about what's underneath of that wanting to lose 20 pounds. They're saying that because that's what they know, that they've been taught is what has to happen in order for them to feel good. Because ultimately what they, in that conversation ends up back at, I want to feel good because I want to play with my kids, or I want to just have a better quality life. I want to be around when you know, I want to be able to travel with my soulmate. I want to, you know, so there's always a deeper reason beyond the physical weight that they want to lose. And so I focus on, you know, that core of what it is that their heart desires. And because ultimately, I think what the journey ends up being for most people is one of creating harmony in their body. This is I created a program called the Harmonic Body Experience for this very reason, because I believe so strongly that, you know, looking at ourselves as a whole being rather than as parts, not just as a body, not just as a mind or a brain, not just, you know, as our emotions, not just as our spirituality, but looking at ourselves as a whole being, and seeking to have access to that sense of wholeness is really what gives us this sense of satisfaction in our lives. When we feel like we're operating on all cylinders, and we feel like, you know, we're successful in however we define success for ourselves, which is part of that process. Defining what success is for ourselves really helps us to feel successful. Because if you never really define that for yourself, then you're always seeking either someone else's idea of success or a never-ending peak that you never ever reach, right? Because most times the idea in your mind about how you want to look and feel is in your mind only, and it always changes because the more you improve, the more you want to improve, and that's just the nature of life. Life wants more life. So I start there with people, and I really try to get to the heart of the matter. What really is their heart's desire to create? What is their heart's desire to create in their lives? I want to have that conversation and then tie in the functionality of a body that they feel good in and they have a good relationship with. Because, there's a myth that losing weight makes you feel better. Just losing weight doesn't necessarily make you feel better. There are lots of health benefits to gaining more lean mass and losing body fat if you were out of balance to begin with. But if you are obsessive about that conversation in your mind and you have disordered eating so that you have a kind of a compulsive, thought process around that, then it's not really enjoyable. You're not going to really reap the rewards, the health rewards, because you're going to be suffering in your mental health.
Absolutely.
So for me, for people who come for that particular reason, I like to start at the heart of the matter and have the conversation around and take it off of losing weight. Because what I find is what we lose, we find eventually. What we release, we have the choice to bring in or let go of. So that's the kind of mindset that I take. What would you like to release? Because the concept goes beyond just the physicality. What we feel and think internally is mirrored in our external expression. So also most people I find who come to me for this and live in larger bodies and aren't feeling well and want to change it, and they're coming to me and say, I want to change it, it's because there's some kind of internal disruption or pain that is not yet healed, that is kind of the impetus for habitually sabotaging, their progress when they start to move into a space of feeling better, and all kinds of other ways that, we undermine our own kind of progress when we have a goal, right? So I think it's a deeper conversation always. And the number one place I start, as I said, is the heart desire. And then I like to have the conversation about what is it that they like, the picture they have in their mind of how they would look, right? Because let's talk about that. Let's put that on the table. And then that opens the door to, like, I want to look like this or that. And let's have a real conversation about that. Like, how about we look at where those ideas came from and if they're really yours.
Absolutely.
And right? Do they fit you? And if not, let's redesign that picture and let's say, hey, I want my life to look like this. And therefore, my body will take this shape. It's going to be functionally fit, as meaning that I can move pain-free. And do all the things I enjoy. So let's say, let's pick something that we're working toward. Let's say I want to be able to, let's say go rock climbing, with my nieces and nephews. Okay, so what do you need for that? Well, I need a stronger upper body. I need stronger hands. I need a stronger core. All right, let's start with that, because that's really going to get you what you want. Right? And then on the back end, we're working on things like, building a relationship with ourselves, becoming our own best friend, right? Loving ourselves regardless of what anyone else says or does or thinks. Like those types of base foundational self-love that is required for us to have really any kind of reciprocal healthy relationships in our lives depends on us having that reciprocal relationship with ourselves. So
yeah, I really sorry.
No, go ahead.
I really like that idea of kind of taking the focus and taking frame away from that one small little goal that people tend to obsess over and making it a more of an experience, I would say. And looking at creating this picture of why they're trying to do it and what their life will look like once as a result of maybe the weight shedding. And kind of, but I definitely find it difficult when people have that hardwired in their minds, that obsession with the scale. Some people weigh themselves every single day, and they really tend to tie, like you said, tie their self-worth to that number, even if, and obviously the scale, we can't see the different benefits that exercise is giving them, whether it's increased lean muscle, which obviously can make the scale go up, higher energy, better relationships at work. So how do you, as the journey goes along, how do you tend to keep people on track and keep the focus off of that fluctuating scale, and kind of keep their mind on the goal of looking at it as a whole body experience and not just that one number?
That's a great question. So part of it's definitely not a linear approach, and it changes a little bit person to person. But generally, what I find is that re-education is really important. For a lot of people, some people think that a pound of muscle weighs more than a pound of fat, right? A pound is a pound, right? So people also don't realize that when you shift your composition and you gain muscle, you also gain water, which means you also gain weight. And so changing the way that you evaluate their physical success, right? That we can't just weigh ourselves. We also have to take measurements, take pictures, maybe pick up our article of clothing that we like. Depending on the person, we might do one, all, or none of those. Because some people are at the place where they don't even want to look at themselves in the mirror because they can't stand the conversation that happens. And the number one thing that has to happen, and the reason that you would, re-educate is to stop the cycle in the mind, right? Where they think that they are a failure because the scale went up and they're not, and then they start spiraling into sabotaging habits because they feel like what they're doing is not enough, therefore they are not enough, et cetera, et cetera. But so the idea is that the re-education is happening so that we can re-pattern the thoughts around the thing that they're obsessing over. And so for some people, taking a break from looking at themselves in the mirror might be the first step. Because if the mirror is the trigger, right, you take away the trigger and then the pattern doesn't develop. So if the mirror is the trigger, so that's what we have to do, is to identify the trigger for them. It might be the mirror, it might be the scale, it might be old outfits in the closet that they used to be able to fit in that just have to be out of their sight so they can be out of their mind for a while we're having these more expansive discussions and these more and repatterning kind of our thought process around the whole process. And so that can be helpful. I don't think it's a good idea to do that in perpetuity, however, because if you want to develop a good relationship with someone, let's say you were in a toxic kind of relationship, in a romantic relationship, but you guys wanted to try to be friends after, like you realized it just didn't work, didn't click, didn't work. And you want to be friends after. You might not be able to be friends right away. So you can't really talk on the phone a lot, can't see each other right away. But let's say in 6 months, you want to reconnect. And then, right? So that's taking a break from the mirror, then reconnecting. Because you can't build a relationship if you not willing to look at someone in the eye.
Yeah.
Right? So at some point you have to get back to the development of the relationship with self and be able to look at yourself and see your own reflection. And so that's the process, right? It's doing whatever you need to do to stop the cycle, the cyclical thinking, the spiral, the trigger, take it out. And then as you're changing your thought process about it and expanding your knowledge and your understanding and your acceptance of self in a way that's more expansive, more empowering, and actually rooted in truth and not just myth from the media, and you're developing a central reference point for who you are and how you are in the world. And when you're doing that, then there comes a time when most people can at least revisit the connection and be able to look at themselves again and see themselves and not just see their bodies, right? And then eventually, so along this process, when they're reconnecting, it's just to build a good relationship. It might start with just not using words that are critical. It's aiming to find something about your body that you like. It's, and maybe it's a step before that. Maybe you're just looking to accept it in the state that it is and say, all right, I'm with you. I'm going to help you be healthier, so we can feel good.
Absolutely.
And along that journey, though, at some point it needs to get to the point for, I think, an access to our full sense of wholeness, get to a point where we also then achieve acceptance at whatever degree we can, and then begin to let go of the attachment. So we have an appreciation that takes the place. We have an appreciation, a gratitude for the service that the body provides, and the fact that it allows us to touch each other, to experience life in a very tangible way. Without it, we couldn't do that. Without it, we'd be spirit that was ever expansive, and just, it would be everything, right? In having a body allows us to be grounded and have experience in the physical world. And so having appreciation and then starting to let go of our attachment to it. So the attachment is really the thing that keeps us stuck, because we're attached to it looking a certain way. We're attached to it, to it in general as us. And so beginning to separate the body from our sense of self is the healthiest thing we can do, because it's not who we are. It's part of our incarnation that allows us to experience the world, which is a different concept, right? Because when we leave here, when we transition from this time and space, we drop the density of the body. And we can agree on that much. Now, what happens after that, there's lots of conversation we could have about possibilities, but we all can agree that our body doesn't go anywhere because we can still see it. So therefore we know that if we can see that the body is still here and we as we know ourselves is not, then there's some kind of separation that happened, because we are not the body. Right? And I think that's a really, really, I think, and underused concept, and understood and just not talked about enough. Like our need to not see ourselves as the body, and knowing ourselves on a deeper level, who we really are, the truth of us, is far more expansive than our physicality. And when we can begin to have a healthier perspective on that, it changes everything. And knowing that also allows me then to have choice, because I can set an intention for it. It becomes more of, in relationships, we make choices about what we do with each other, how much time we spend focused on certain things, with gifts that we give each other, right? We make choices. And so rather than being kind of led by these innate yearnings that develop from old patterns, and these cravings that are coming out of old patterns, and these like false desires to create these ideal, bodies that are being perpetuated by media, all of these concepts are external. But when we really go inside and we really begin to know ourselves, love ourselves, trust ourselves, these are all parts of a foundational relationship. And everything changes. Yeah. And then the conversation is just, it's a choice. What do I want to eat? What informs that choice? For me, it's what is going to help functionally help my body operate the best to do the things I want to do with it. And how do I want to feel? If I eat gluten, or I eat pork, or I eat, beans, even like certain beans, I know I'm not going to feel good. I can still make a choice to eat it, but at least I made a conscious choice, and I wasn't at the mercy of the food. I didn't eat it because I had some external pressure, or I had some yearning that I felt I was out of control in making the choice. Right? I'm choosing it because I want it versus because I feel like I need it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I feel like some of the tactics that I like to employ with my clients, and even myself, because I feel like even as fitness professionals, I would assume most of us tend to fall victim to some of the same same issues and the same barriers that a lot of general population people do.
Mhm.
Because I know that I'm not immune from checking the scale a little bit too much every once in a while, or um, I know I'm not immune to consuming things that I know aren't going to serve my body well. Um, so doing those things like obviously going back to the idea of like kind of non-scale victories throughout the week or throughout the process in general, whatever time frame you're looking at things like, man, I feel I've been a lot better mood lately because of the exercise or because of the food that I've been eating. And looking at things like, hey, because of the work that I've been putting out on my nutrition and the work that I've been putting in with my exercise, I've been able to do a couple more push-ups this week, which is really a big thing that I like to celebrate with my clients and celebrate with myself even, like and just giving yourself that gratitude and giving yourself that pat on the back, whether you're doing it with someone or doing it by yourself, is a very key part for me. Just a kind of to keep people out of slumps and to keep people on track throughout the process for sure. Kind of, you want to talk a little bit more about like non-scale like victories that people can celebrate like that?
100%. Yeah,
Yeah.
I love that. And I think you're so right. I think sometimes people think that professionals in the wellness field like are immune to,
Mm-hmm.
not liking our bodies sometimes, or, that's just not the case. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I much prefer when my belly is flat.
Mm-hmm.
I do. I love it.
Absolutely.
I love to see the little lines.
Mm-hmm.
It just, I just, to me, it's sexy, and I love that. And and I'm gonna get back to your question and non-scale wins in one sec. I thought about like how kind of my idea of sexy also kind of was different than most the women that I knew as I
Mm-hmm.
was, becoming. And like I felt sexier when I had muscles, when I
Mm-hmm.
had muscle tone, when I look and when I felt and looked athletic.
Mm-hmm.
And so for some people it's to look and feel thin. It's, for some people, right, it's just different.
Mm-hmm.
Um and but so just transitioning into your question, when you're saying non-scale wins that I look for, and that I help my clients to look for to feel
Mm-hmm.
successful along the journey rather than waiting until they meet their ultimate goal, which would,
Yeah.
maybe that's not even a thing. Maybe it's just
Mm-hmm.
as they're embarking on the journey. I think it's important to celebrate every darn thing,
Mm-hmm.
and to begin to celebrate with things that have nothing to do with food. I
Mm-hmm.
think so
Absolutely.
much of our celebrations and this culture and American culture and other cultures too, but I know this one most because I've been here longest, is around food.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we can, there's a whole relationship and mindset that might even need to shift around that. Like you feel
Mm-hmm.
like you're depriving yourself because you haven't been participating in certain celebratory events with your friends or family for so long, or you like they all got cake and got the yogurt. You know what I mean? Like, you know what I mean? Like it can
Yeah.
be a thing, and you're sitting there feeling
Yeah.
like
And
the
that
person.
in that instance, I always like to tell people that you do sometimes have to be the weird one in the group if you have these large lofty goals. Sometimes you do if food is a big part of your like social culture. Like I know a lot of our clients, they go out to eat often, like whether it's for business or they don't like to cook, or they just kind of the retirees, and they just kind of enjoy that social aspect. So if that's a large part of who you are, then you do have to make sacrifices sometimes. And obviously, you don't want to be miserable and just avoid those situations as a whole. But if you guys are going to a steakhouse and typically you would crush three glasses of wine and a large steak, maybe making those weird little sacrifices that might not be socially normal all the time and cutting that steak in half, or staying away from the line a couple nights a week, or just doing those little things that might be out of your comfort zone and might kind of get you some like awkward looks, but knowing and having the confidence to know that that is important to you, and if
Yes.
and even explaining that to people in your social circle and being like, this is what's important to me. I would
Yes.
appreciate it if you were on board with this, because this is a step in my journey that I need to get control of at this moment.
Yes.
Hmm.
Yes. Don't mind being the picky orderer.
Yeah.
I, and it's a confidence thing. It's being
Yeah.
willing to choose you over everything else that's happening.
Hmm.
Regardless of the looks or the comments because any comments or looks you're going to get is really about the person who's giving them.
Hmm.
Like maybe they're not confident enough to actually really ask for what they want and need.
Yeah. Yeah.
So knowing what you want and need and is really important, because if you know that if you eat that cake at that event, that it's going to send you into a spiral of binging for the rest of the night.
Yeah.
Don't sacrifice your mental health over a couple looks at the table. Like
Hmm.
eat the yogurt if that's the thing. Or
Yeah.
if eating the yogurt is going to send you and feeling like the only one out is going to send you into a spiral, then eat the freaking cake. Like, it's just, and I think it's going to be individual, and
Hmm.
people just need to make the choices that most align with their personal situation, like whatever it is
Hmm.
that best gonna help them to stay in a place of peace with
Hmm.
their path is what the choices that they can make that are in alignment.
And it's certainly going to be a lot of trial and error. It's going to be a lot of kind of figuring things out. There's going to be ups and downs. Like you might try to resist the cake, and then you kind of give in at the end of the night, and then you might have like a binging episode, and you might feel like crap afterwards. But it's also just regaining that, getting right back on track, and having the confidence to get right back on track, and know that that one slip up doesn't define you, and kind of keeping that grand mission on for sure.
Yes, getting back into your flow, and so that I
Hmm.
encourage people to create a flow that works for them, a
Yeah.
lifestyle.
Yeah.
And so that looks different for everyone, but that flow is where you feel the most you,
Hmm.
and where your body feels good and you feel good in your body.
Hmm.
And so the just as important as knowing when you're being successful is also seeing things that don't meet that kind of the mark for what you say is successful as failures.
Hmm.
They're just new ways that you discover that don't work, which is
Yeah.
great. Now you
Yeah.
know another way it doesn't work, and you'll try something different.
Hmm.
So some of the ways that we can mark and kind of measure our success to help us feel good about our journey along the way, I would say, is to start with the fact that you're consistent. One, like if you set a goal to go to the gym 3 times that week, the fact that you went is amazing. Because for some people, consistency is probably the number one reason why they haven't been successful,
Hmm.
is that they weren't consistent for a long enough period of time. Um, Another thing, and so then you might then use one of those non-food related ways to celebrate.
Hmm.
Maybe you have friends over and you have game night, or you buy yourself a new outfit, or whatever it is,
Yeah.
anything. And not to celebrate with consumerism either, but you get the
Yeah.
idea.
Yeah.
Um, and then another way is to measure your where you begin, so that you have milestones that you can achieve over time.
Hmm.
If you don't assess, you're guessing. So
Hmm.
even if you're working out by yourself, do a little assessment. How many push-ups can you
Yeah.
do before you start? How long can you
Hmm.
hold a plank before you start? How many
Hmm.
jumping jacks? How many leg lifts? How many step-ups? Whatever,
Hmm.
before you start feeling gassed, and time yourself and make those little marks along with your pictures and all your measurement stuff. Make that part of the assessment process so that you know where you began. Because another reason why people fall off is because they don't have a right perspective of their transformation. Because
Hmm.
you're in your body, the picture for the frame, you can't see it. And so people around you are recognizing changes and
Hmm.
you can't see them as well.
It's kind of like breaking up a lofty giant goal into little digestible pieces. So instead of having that, I need to lose 20 pounds, breaking it up into little pieces throughout the process. Like, hey, I need to be consistent 3 days a week. I know that I need to cook every day this week. I know that I need to go for 2 walks this week. Go like, but you can always go for a walk. You can always cook. But you so having those little, like you said, milestones throughout the process, and obviously those will aggregate over time like a snowball effect, and while also giving you those constant little victories that will moving you forward.
Yes, another way of do it with certain people is to wrap success around their engagement in the things that make their total wellness complete. So, for example, part of the reason that they're not feeling well, it may be tied to their lack of quality sleep. And so then we look at their sleep habits and what that looks like. And maybe it just means that they need to start going to bed earlier, which sounds simple, but for many people, it's tied up in a lot of other things that are happening before bed.
Schedules and priorities, and so
Right.
it can be a lot of different variables to kind of pick apart, I guess, and that takes a lot of self-reflection, like we talked about in other discussions, for sure.
So we're looking at those things that help you feel well. So in the beginning of a conversation, along with their heart desire, we'll look at what makes you feel good, what makes you feel whole and gives you access to your wholeness. And when you feel your best, what are the things that are happening? And what are you engaging in? How are you spending your time and your energy? And are you doing those now? Sometimes it might be something that you would have never thought of. Like, I used to paint and now I don't anymore. And I miss it. And, and so maybe it's re-engaging in your creativity. Maybe that's what you're missing. And maybe that would make you feel more yourself and more motivated to stay in flow. Right. So it's really having that conversation and reflecting, like we said, on yourself and knowing yourself, which is part of that process. Knowing, trusting, loving, accepting that self is a hope. It's a process that needs to happen in order for you to have a longevity with any type of lifestyle commitment. Because most diets, 80% of them don't last more than 2 years.
Yeah.
95% of people regain the weight that they've released or lost in the first year, and 97 and by the second year regain it. So what's missing? What needs to change? And I think it's like a lot of things we talked about. It's the perception, it's the focus, it's re-education. It's, releasing the mental stagnancy that we have around what beauty is and what our beauty is and who we are. All those kind of underlying kind of factors that help us to know who we are as complete beings. Beyond our physicality, I think are really creating harmony between all of our bodies, our mental, spiritual, emotional bodies that help us to stay in flow. You can't just look at one part.
Yeah. And just kind of like in summation, it feels like I like the idea of it's a ongoing conversation and with yourself, constantly having and consistently having that honest conversation with yourself, and constantly reflecting on the decisions that you're making, whether they're and why you're making those decisions, and kind of being easy on yourself and not being so hard on yourself, because society's trying to do that anyway, and just trying to consistently keep that good relationship and keep that flow is very important for sure.
Yeah, I hear you. Self-compassion is key.
Yes, absolutely. Tenderness.
Yeah.
Be easy on yourself sometimes.
Beautiful. Well, I enjoyed this conversation thoroughly.
Absolutely.
You want to tell people how they can get in touch with you if they ever wanted to work with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have my you can contact me on my Instagram at SaulIsLife98. And you can also just hit me on that social, and Instagram DMs are good. I see everything. So and I've been posting like workout videos and stuff like that to kind of so you can follow along at home if you're interested in staying active as well.
Perfect. And you can find me on Instagram as well at the True Takia, and I'll drop a link to the Kinetic Life group in the chat. So it's been wonderful being with you all. I hope that this was beneficial to you. And please comment on the video and ask questions and make comments so that we would love to have this be an interactive podcast, where
Absolutely.
we're able to know how you feel about these topics and maybe even suggest topics that we could talk about. We really appreciate it. So until next time, peace and love.
All right. Thanks, guys.